What I'm starting with here, with this idea of revising effectively, don't get the wrong impression here. I'm not going to tell you how to revise, okay, despite what it says there. Because revising, like planning, is a very individual thing and doesn't work the same for everybody in this room, okay? Some people in here, as we'll know, love a flashcard, right? Others in here despise them, okay? And some people really enjoy a mind map. Others, no interest in them at all. It depends very much the way you learn. What I'm more concerned with here today is focusing on the outcomes of it, what you're trying to achieve through effective revision for literature, approaches that might actually get in the way and restrict your outcomes. So warnings about those, but mostly overall ideas that are there to help you to achieve each of the main assessment objectives. And that's very much what I'm focused around. Okay. So let's start with what we're interested in, and will be a feature of all of the lectures that we're going to be working on here. And that is level 6. Referred to as the Holy Grail there, not just because that's an outstanding film. Never seen it. But the Holy Grail, it's the thing that you're all aiming for. Because if you're in that level in the summer, you're getting a 9. Okay. It's possible it just get 8 at the bottom if that's going to be the case, but basically you're going to get a 9. So that's what we all want in here, right? So we want to unpack what that's trying to say to us. We want to draw out of this what really we need to achieve in order to get towards that 9. And I think I'm directly towards particularly what you see on the right-hand side here on the mark scheme, which is a descriptor of what these look like at the bottom of the level and at the top of the level. So to just scrape into this, you need to demonstrate exploratory thought and or analysis of the methods. Notice that idea, exploratory. Very important. The idea that you're going to need to explore, not just say. And that's something I'm going to come back to. The idea that having an interpretation in your head ready to write down is not going to get you into level 6. Okay? You need to be ready to explore different interpretations, to be able to think back and forth and get into a discussion. And that's going to be the key thing here. If you want to get to the top of a level, and there are plenty of 30 out of 30s that are given. Okay? I'm going to mention now something if you don't know me say already, you're going to be sick of it pretty soon because I say it all the time. But just to point out to you, I am a lead examiner for AQA for English literature, and we give regular 30s. We're encouraged that if we really see something that is excellent, that is really well put together for somebody of your age, we give it a 30. Okay? And that, as it says there, is going to be a critical, exploratory, well-structured argument that's going to have a range of judicious references. It's going to have analysis and fine-grained insight for analysis and methods. It's going to convincingly explore the ideas, maybe any contextual ideas within this. But the thing I want to draw your attention to is the word here. It takes a conceptualized approach to the full task. Now, any of you who worked with me recently will know that is the word I focus in on a lot with you. That's what we've got to deal with, a conceptualized approach. Now, the rest of the lectures in this series will be largely dealing with conceptualized approaches. I'm going to take approaches to that from there. But what do we mean by this? Okay. What is going to be a conceptualized approach? Well, that's what we're looking for in AO1 task, first of all. The idea that your overall response, your answer, remember, we award AO1 tasks at the end of a piece. So it's based on the entire thing together. What we're looking for is that you have been critical and you have been conceptual. Now, critical, remember, is not criticizing, is being like a critic. In other words, looking at it from an eye of, what's right about this? What's not so right about this? Okay. And the conceptual element of it, as we say there, is at the heart of what we're looking for. For example, have a look at this as an opening thesis statement from an Inspector Calls answer. Okay. Obviously, the question here is about Arthur Burling, right? Mr. Burling, and how we see him as an unpleasant figure. Now, it says Priestley has created Arthur as a figure to be hated, a representation of everything that is wrong about capitalism. And so he makes clear that his entire focus is on business rather than the people around him. However, despite making him condemn himself out of his own mouth, it is Sheila and Eric who really show him up for what he is. Now, if you look at what's said about him at the beginning, it's a perfect example of what we mean by conceptualizing your response. It is not saying Arthur is a mean person, a selfish person, or something like this. It is seeing him as a figure that is used, a role, a construct that is being used for a purpose by Priestley. Now, we all know that Inspector Calls, for example, you'll know it is one of those texts that doesn't really try and open up different interpretations. It's telling us what to think. It is telling us that in 1945, 46, the world needs to change, right? It's telling us those things. So what's it doing here? It's looking at how Arthur is used to do that. That he is deliberately created as a figure to be hated. He is deliberately created as a representation of everything that's wrong about capitalism. Okay? And pointing out that his entire focus is on business rather than the people around him, and carrying on from there. Now, this relates to your revision very clearly because you need to be able to, in a very short space of time, come at things from that conceptual point of view. Therefore, a lot of your revision needs to be focused around thinking conceptually about your text. With Inspector Calls, for example, nice and easy, take every single one of those characters. What's their purpose? Why are they there? Why did Priestley, when he invented this situation, when he invented this world that we're going to go into, why did he choose the patriarch of the family to be someone who apparently has worked their way up from the working class? Why did he then give him a wife of a higher class? What's he suggesting about society then? Why did he make them old enough to both be essentially Victorians in their outlook, even though we're in an Edwardian world here? Why make the girl of the family the one who is going to change the most? Why make the son of the family the one who's completely messed up in his head? And why have the girl of the family marrying someone of a higher class than all of them? Why choose those ideas? Well, the answer to Arthur, as far as this person is concerned, is that he is representing everything that's wrong about capitalism. That's why he comes from that lower level on the way up. That's why he suggested that way, because capitalism is about the idea of potentially social mobility, of people being able, supposedly, to climb up from the lowest to the highest. But Priestley then wants to take him and show that having done that, he doesn't get any interest in people around him. It changes and corrupts him. So that's their answer. Now, you could do that with any of those. You could do that with any of the themes. You could do that with any of the characters and others. You could do that with any major element of any of the texts you've got, any of the poems. What's going on underneath here? Why has the writer created this? What are they trying to say? Critical responses are what's needed with interpretations, as I said before. And I pointed out before that interpretations are very, very important, but important enough that they aren't just regurgitated from somewhere else. And this is a danger I'm going to come back to again as well. A danger that you find particularly with the internet and with TikTok especially, that you are going to be bombarded this summer, if you aren't already, with people who are going to tell you, here's an easy way to get it. Here's how to get a 9. And they go, right? and they're wrong. Okay? Because if anyone's giving you an easy way, then they don't know English, do they? Because it's not easy to get behind. There is no easy way. There is no shortcut. The only way to do it is to do it well, to do it using those skills we just saw. So when people try and give you interpretations that are already formed, rather than think, I'll repeat that, think, what's wrong with that? What do I agree with? What don't I agree with in that? And deal with it critically. Same when I'm talking to you. Don't sit here and say that everything I'm saying is right. No. Right? Take it and criticize it. Look at it critically. What is right? What is not right? What do I agree with? What don't I agree with? And that's how we get into this. Now, when you move on to references, which are also gone for here, again, the key word here is judicious, and this introduces something else about your revision. One of the things that people like you, who are essentially, let's face it, you lot here are amongst the hardest working people in the school, right? You are going to push and push and push yourself in many cases to get the best you can. How do you do it with English? Well, with maths, I suppose there's a great deal of stuff you can easily learn. How do you do it with English? There's no definite way. So people come up and say, right, I'm going to learn a load of quotations. Now that tells you straight away why that is a problem. Okay? Because judicious means the ability to choose effectively. So if you learn quotations, you're going down the wrong line, because rote learning quotations is restrictive. You have a certain group of quotations there and you can pick a few of them. But you're then crowbarring them into a situation. You're forcing your interpretation into which quotations you've remembered. It's restricted. Judicious means you've got a broad range to choose from. So how do you do that? Well, the first one, and there's no easy way, unfortunately, of this, is basically you just need to keep reading the texts. And that will come to the number one way of revising, is read the texts. You're lucky that all of your texts are pretty short, okay? But the more you get to know them, the more control you have. But also be aware that the key word is references, not quotations, okay? You are perfectly permissible. It's perfectly permissible for you, and you can achieve full marks by paraphrasing, putting quotations into your own words because you don't completely remember them, right? Particularly if you're dealing with spectacles, where you have nothing in front of you to help you. There's nothing wrong with thinking, oh yeah, I'm trying to talk about that bit where Arthur gets angry with the inspector and the inspector cuts across him, but I can't remember what's being said. And so you say, Arthur attempts to criticise the inspector, attempts to tell the inspector to stop talking to his wife that way, and the inspector begins to just cut across him and shout. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's making the point you need. Okay? It's fine to do that. It's mentioned by AQA repeatedly. When you do quote, you often only need individual words. There's never really a need for whole phrases. So that learning of phrases for quotations doesn't help you at all. It's going to be individual words that you want to remember. If you're quoting a whole word, right, are you going to comment on its impact? If you're quoting a whole phrase, you're going to comment on all of that. Or are you just focusing on a particular word? In which case, just quote that word. And words are much easier to remember. Okay? It's very easy to remember, especially if you've been rereading and rereading, that Gerald claims that leaping into bed with Eva was, or Daisy as she's there, was inevitable. Easy to remember that word. The whole quote, I suppose it was inevitable. Is that it? I think so. What more do we gain from that? The key word is inevitable. Remembering individual words is easy, especially if you reading the text. They'll stick in the keywords, especially as you probably underline them in your annotations. Okay? So, judicious references come from knowing the text and having a variety of things to go for. There's an example on the board there for you. A section again from a different Inspector Calls one about Gerald, in which, as you can see, there's references to things that happen. He inadvertently reveals his affair. No need to quote him going, Daisy who? Okay, or, or what? I think he says. No need to quote that, because I mean, what am I going to comment on? I'm commenting on the fact that he inadvertently reveals his affair. And then when he attempts to avoid telling Sheila the truth, again, do I need to quote all these things of him going, what? Daisy, Eva Smith, isn't it, first of all? How do you know Eva Smith? I didn't know her. Do I have to spend ages copying all that out? No. The person I'm writing for knows what I mean when he attempts to avoid telling the truth. And I'm not going to comment on the individual words, so I just refer to it. What I am going to comment on is that he then says, when he wants to get her out of the room later, she should be protected. Because I'm then going to point out that the problem is him. He's talking about protecting her, even though the problem is what he has done, which doesn't protect her. So that actually makes sense. I'm going to say that. I didn't write this, but before I take someone else's credit. Further on, we've got a lot of mention here, bringing up being away from her last summer. He doesn't lie to her, but he twists the truth, saying he was busy at work. Paraphrase. But deliberately avoiding mentioning the affair. Another straight quotation further on, Gerald constantly makes comments about her not being a help rather than showing guilt. Again, a direct reference there. You see what I mean? That hopefully illustrates how you're going to need to know this far better. Now, when people get to AO2, they struggle a little bit with this. Remember, AO2 just refers to the writer's methods. The writer's methods equals anything that the writer does. Anything that the writer does. That includes characterization. If you're talking about the way you correct a character, you're doing AO2. You talk about the tone, you're doing that AO2. It's not just talking about structure or language. And in fact, when you do talk about structure, language, etc., close analysis of individual words can be an issue. Close analysis isn't a problem, but if your close analysis is a choice of a particular word, it can be a problem. Think about your text. It's fine if you're doing poetry, isn't it? Individual words often mean a huge amount in poetry. But if you're writing about Inspector Courts and you're writing about Gerald, the whole thing, taking one word that Gerald says and making that a major focus, work, does it? One word he says doesn't have that effect. He's got a whole play he talks through. So it's got to have some kind of element. It's got to have some kind of element to it, okay, that that makes it actually worthwhile you looking at it, okay, as you see in there. So even though we're looking at analysis and explanation, what you really need to do is think much more carefully, I would say, about why the writer is making the choice that they're making, the impact of the choice they're making, and linking it in to that conceptualized argument you're going for. What does help and could be part of your revision is to remember the impact of different genres. I talked about how poetry can be individual words, but with drama, maybe you need to think about how it's actually portrayed as a drama. Inspector Calls is there to be seen, remember, not read. So therefore, be much more interested, not so much in a single word that you have, but in events that happen. We're much more interested in watching Gerald squirm when he's revealed the name of Daisy Benson. We're much more interested in how that appears to us, character-wise, the way that Sheila deals with it, than with individual words that he might use. We're much more interested in the impact of a photograph. Sheila has shown the photograph, and she half stifles the screen and then runs. So not only is she running out and escaping and fleeing from her responsibilities at that point, also actually trying to stop herself from screaming out loud, trying to stifle her. At that point, you see, she's very much the middle class woman that she's meant to be. She's not meant to show the emotion out there, and she's running away, so she doesn't know. But then, as an audience, notice that within 5 minutes, she's back. and she's back, and from that moment on, we don't see any behaviour like that. That is a far more interesting way of understanding. So, as you look at the example again here from a power and conflict one this time, what you can see is that we're far more concerned with here of making sure that our focus is on the writer. And in terms of your revision, that's what we should be looking at. Why has the writer done what the writer has done? What have they done? Why? How have they constructed this? When we talk about the shattered visage here, why use the face? As you can see, that comment there, that's a clear level 6 one. Shelley may be suggesting that more than the statue is shattered, the legacy or emotions are too. This was year 10's answer, by the way, a few years back now, suggesting that his legacy is broken. That's far more interesting than going, the word shattered suggests, yeah, okay, focusing in on there. It also means you need to think carefully about why the writer's doing it and how he put it together. In here, you see the reference to the phrase King of Kings. One of the most frustrating things I ever see when Ozymandias is a number of people, I know where they get it from, who sit there and say, King of Kings, it's a reference to Jesus. He's portraying himself, Ozymandias, like Jesus. Hang on, Ozymandias was 2,000 years before Jesus. How's he doing that? Doesn't make any sense. So again, knowing that and then just thinking, actually, he's saying he's the ultimate ruler. He's saying he's king of all the kings around him. Makes much more sense than repeating some stuff about Jesus that doesn't make any sense. Okay, right. So you can see in there how that works. You can also see good use of talk about the sonnet form being controlled, not that it's often used for love poetry, which it is sometimes, but it isn't other times, so it doesn't really make sense. Stick to what you're seeing or what you're thinking, okay? And then finally in the AOs, AO3. I think by now all of you, none of you will have the wrong idea about AO3, I think, because I know your teachers generally understand this. AO3 used to be a big problem for people who thought, oh, it's context. I have to repeat loads of things about context. Remember, AO3 refers to ideas, interpretations, contexts. Ideas is the first word. Okay, essentially, when you're exploring AO3, what you're doing is you're looking at the idea in the question. If you are answering the question, you are dealing with AO3. Now, in terms of revision, then, what you need to do is consider those bigger ideas. Now, some of them it's easy. Power and conflict poetry, guess what the big ideas are? Power and conflict is kind of given away. So you take these ideas and you explore them. You say, well, what do I see in those? What are they trying to do? That's where you can bring explore them. You can think it in to the text. Where do we see this within the text? Sometimes contextual information is important. I just gave you an example of Ozymandias. Sometimes, and I'll give you Ozymandias again, it's not helpful. I don't care as an examiner, nor does any other examiner. I don't care that Ozymandias may have been based on Ramesses II. What's that got to do with the question? It's about power. I don't care. What are you telling me about Ramesses II for? What I am interested in would be things like he's from an ancient time. He's from an ancient time. Therefore, the passage of time is huge. That's central to the. That's what I care about contextually. Right? So, when you're exploring and looking at detailed links, that's what you need to refer to. So again, in your preparation, that's what you can go for. So here's an example. Christmas Carol 1 this time, in which AO3 has been effectively used here. It's a question on Christmas and Dickens' attitude to Christmas. The breadth of views on Christmas allowed Dickens to portray a better world. one in which Christmas brings joy into the heart of people, whatever their circumstance. Straight away, there is a clear link in the ideas behind Christmas and the effect and impact of them. Yet he takes this idea further, using the time as a way to demonstrate the possibilities of society becoming something more caring and inclusive if people embrace the Christmas spirit. Now, say the questions about Christmas, there's your big idea. They're exploring it and the ideas that go with it. The extract is primarily concerned with creating a picture of Christmas morning that shows a people at one in their joy and happiness. They go about their activities. Dickens paints a picture of people dressing up in their best clothes, pairs this with their gayest faces as though they are dressing themselves up in those too. Lovely bit of AOT there as well. The extent of this happiness is clear in his list of how innumerable people come from all different directions and places, basically from all parts of society, but all with the same destination. The symbolism of this, all the differences moving in the same direction, is clear to the reader. Now, those last two little sentences there are a perfect example of where context works. It's just pointing out that if innumerable people are coming, then that must mean they know Christmas carols from all parts of society. So we're now talking about the breadth of society coming together, and that's already been picked up and argued before. That's effective use of it. Nothing going back then in Dickens' time, there was a big gap between people who were poor and rich. No, just how it's used. So, where does that all come together then? And I'm sorry if this isn't world changing, but revision really shouldn't be. Okay? It's just a question of being effective in whatever you choose. My first recommendation by Maya is that literally what I said. Just read, and do you know how long it takes to read an inspector course? Hour and a half at best. That's it. How many times can you read that between now and the summer? Christmas Carol. Again, not much longer than that. Okay? In your copies, which have got those like big, pages with hardly any words on, haven't they? Right? It's about 110 pages or something like that. You're not going to take a minute to read page of those. The poems, only 15 of them, and they're pretty short. They don't take very long to read. Even Macbeth, shortest of Shakespeare's plays or Shakespeare's tragedy. Okay? It really doesn't take a huge amount. And you don't, of course, have to read it. You can watch it as well or listen to it at the same time. So you can reread again. You can read the whole text, yes, beginning to end. But here's the other thing you can do. And I've been working on this very much with my class in year 11. Sections. Break it into small sections. We've been looking at the fact that most of those sections, you're taking 5 minutes. 5 minutes it takes to look at that section. That's all. What an easy way to get in and quickly get in and look at it. What I'm talking about is breaking down into key things that happen. Even if you only break it into individual scenes in Macbeth, why do them in order? Do ones that you don't completely get and understand. Map out the big ideas. That's how we can deal with AO3, AO1, the conceptual thing, but also we can introduce AO2. You can start just getting together an idea at the center and start taking it out in all kinds of directions. Now, you can do that with the text where you're looking at it in front of you. But a very effective idea can sometimes be to do it without the text. I remember sitting watching somebody, one of my A-level English students, a few years back now, in a revision lesson I was supervising. She walked up to a board like this one, the double-sized one that you get in there. She was revising chemistry, and I watched her literally just take an entire topic of chemistry, just off the top of her head, mapping out all around the entire. What a great way of showing your knowledge and finding the gaps. Now, obviously, it's not as focused in as chemistry on that way. It's more open and broad, and you've got so many different things you can come in. But as an example, on Thursday, when I was getting all this ready for you, I thought, I'm going to sit down and do it just to show it's easy to do, right? And I put down Supernaturally Macbeth in the middle, and I just started doing this myself. This was at the end of lunchtime. I think I had 10 minutes left when I started at lunchtime. And so it took me no more than 10 minutes in it. So I started by thinking Supernaturally Macbeth is about chaos versus order. There's my conceptual thing. The whole point of the Supernaturally Macbeth is about chaos, supernatural order, what it's fighting against, the standard thing of it. And I started thinking of ideas that came with it, the great that came into there, the fact that Macbeth disrupts it. He disrupts it. When he does that, he gains the crown, but he loses control. He loses control of himself, because we see that basically when the witches come back in Act 4 scene, when they have control of Macbeth. And I started mapping it out, all the arrows around it, joining things together. I got tragedy in there. I got stuff about King James and his impact on there. I've got Banquo Macbeth, the witches and Macduff and Lady Macbeth at the heart of it in there. I brought in the key scene in The Witches, the Act 4 scene 1 thing in there. I brought in the strange events that are mentioned, the omens or whatever, Ross and the old man, Angus and that kind of thing. There are quotations in there. When I wanted to get Macduff's doubts about Macbeth, I remembered, oh yeah, he says, wherefore did you say? It's in Act 2 scene 3 when he's going, why did you do that? When he finds out that he killed the two guards that supposedly did it. And, around that's just the way I did it. But it's a very, very effective thing that you can do. Just start mapping out and writing out in the way that you do, however suits you, in an entire topic. Now, Supernaturally Macbeth, for example, is a very, very strong contender to come up this summer. Hasn't come up yet. Okay, there's been a side reference in a past question to Macbeth and Banquo's attitude to the supernatural, but that's the best we've had. We haven't had the impact of the supernatural. So there's something that may well come up. And that didn't take me long to start to map out. And of course, I can continue. I can add more on. I could go back to the book if needed and add more. I could go back to my notes, my exercise books, if I had that. But it's a way of doing this. Okay. And as I started to talk to you about before, online revision, is effective, but be careful. There are a lot of people now. Gosh, this is that really annoying advert around now, isn't it? Ptosis is a process. Oh God, you seen that? That awful TikTok advert that's around, which seems to claim that TikTok helps you revive because someone made a rap about mitosis and someone remembered it in the exam. Even though I'm thinking to myself, look at that question, and that probably needs a lot more information than was in it. But anyway, all over the place are key things, and there are certain people who've kind of risen to the top because they've been used. Be very wary of them. Very wary of them. Okay, I'm wondering about whether I should mention them, considering this might come on as well. It sounds like I'm slagging him off, but that's tough. Mr. Bruff. Mr. Bruff is there. Fair play to him. He's done very well. He always comes up as the first person whenever you look into anything and Google it along those lines. Not very well liked by AQA, I can tell you that. He's brought up regularly AQA because he peddles easy answers. He gives interpretations that you can just follow and go through. Something that aren't necessarily right. Storm on the Island. Coming up. Then you come across the Storm on the Island. Oh, it's all about the Trouble in Ireland interpretation. Over the trash, right? Of course. Storm on the Island was written in 1966. About the history of Ireland. Though, of course, there were disputes. The main troubles didn't start until 1967. So why would he be writing in here before that? And then you look at the whole thing. It doesn't make any bloody sense, does it? Why are there air attacks coming from the IRA? Air attacks? Why are they attacking their own country? It doesn't make any sense at all. But someone comes up with it and they go, oh, let's mention it. Oh, let's bring it up. It's not an interpretation you can back up easily, so it doesn't really help you. Be careful of online revision things, Mr. Everything English, Mr. Stannis, all these ones here. I'm not saying they're completely useless, but I'm saying be very careful of them. In fact, the reason our YouTube channel exists is purely because we were sitting here telling people, be wary of these channels, be wary of these channels, but then they didn't have anything else to use. So we thought, well, we've got to give them something that does it the right way, that doesn't just give you easy answers. And so spent a lot of time putting videos and things together that are on there. So there's a place for it, but be very, very wary, especially easy answers. So essentially, overall, that is my recommendation to the end of how to revise. But it comes to the points that we've made all the way through. It's about developing those conceptual ideas. You know, think about Macbeth, tragedy as a genre. What about the impact of clothing? Have you noticed that? Constant clothing imagery in Macbeth? That's one you can look up if you don't know. Think about how that works, how that's being used. Even bird motifs, anti-Catholic sentiment. That's one of my later ones this term. A Christmas Carol, the effect of the structure of it, the impact of the narrative voice. You know, there's a bloke in Christmas Carol who's literally having conversations with you. He starts at the beginning waffling on about there is a doornail. What did a doornail discover? He's not a character in the thing. He's a narrator. He's having a conversation with you. That's interesting. Why is that being used? Inspector Calls, the role, function, and characters that we talk about. Think about those things. Think about the AO3, the ideas that come around with it. The last thing that I mentioned to you, on the Digital Learning Hub, there's a lot of stuff being put on there. Do have a look at it for English, particularly for English literature. There's a folder I put on yesterday to make this of use to you called General Revision. If you go into Year 11, go to English Subjects and Resources, Year 11, there's a folder called General Revision. In there, I put something that might help you. Just a final little thing here. Again, I'm not a big fan here of revision timetables. If you do, lovely. They work for you great. I used to hate them because I was immediately a failure. Because within 2 days, I was behind and I just thought I'm useless. So I hated it. So the thing that I developed, which is much better, is a positive thing. So basically, where rather than tell yourself you've got to do this and then, you know, okay, well, I've done it. Well, I've created a chart that has a list of all of those sections of each individual literature text, proper language as well, each individual text down the side where you can just tick off when you've spent 5-10 minutes on it. So you can see what you've spent time with. You can see what you revised. I've put another version of it up there that has then red, yellow, green, traffic lights next to it. So next to each one of them, you could quite easily put a little marker, a little tick or whatever, where you are at the point in time. Am I red, yellow, or green on that scene, or that section? They're the things that might help. Have a look, see how they work. So that's just an introduction. I wanted to do this one early because you want to get going on revision relatively early. The earlier you do, the less impact it has on you. Okay, so thank you very much for that. And